Good day, everybody, and welcome to the second Friday in the amazing month of June 2026. I'm John Morrow. This is Resolve to Live Forward, the podcast. Currently a monologue, and I'm currently in a series that will cover a period of 6 months where the episodes are going to talk about the journey of grief. And today is actually in this series of episodes that I'm doing, talking about the experience of grief and living forward with that grief, not trying to run away from it, hide from it, or curl up and sadly, for some people, wait to die. But rather, this is about how you live forward with meaningfulness, because as I've said before, living forward's a choice. Resolve to Live Forward, the podcast, is heard on multiple podcast platforms, including Spotify and the Apple Store. In addition, I have a YouTube channel that is tied directly to me under Resolve to Live Forward, John Morrow Coaching, johnmorrowcoaching.com, and johnmorrowcoaching@gmail.com. And this particular podcast, if all goes according to plan and there are no extenuating circumstances, always launches at 12 noon every single Friday through the services of a podcast hosting platform that, for those of you who are doing podcasts or are dreaming of doing a podcast, might want to consider the services of Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout actually handles allowing me to upload the episodes both in video and audio, allows me to select the podcast platforms that I want to push this message out to, and handles a lot of the analytical data that gives me feedback on how many people are actually listening and downloading the episodes. And there is a market out there, a niche, a group, a very special group of people who relate to this message, and I want to express my appreciation and thanks. We begin today with episode 11, which is going to be simply entitled, Why Waiting Keeps You Stuck. Let me say that again. Why waiting keeps you stuck? There is a conversation that often we put off. It's because it makes us uncomfortable. And the most uncomfortable part sometimes can be the fact that in putting the conversation off, what we're trying to do is we're trying to maintain control of our emotions. But I want to set all of this up by sharing with you some notes that I have made that I'm reading from today. Have you ever noticed how often we tell ourselves we'll eventually do something, but we'll wait until later to do it? We're just not quite ready to do it now. It can wait. These are such things as, I'll make the call, but I'm going to wait until later. Yes, I'll reconnect, but I'm going to wait until later. Yeah, I'll reach out, but not now. I'm going to wait till later. Or later, I'll tell them why I really want them to uh, have an opportunity to meet and talk with me, and I'll tell them what I really want them to know. The problem is that later has a way of becoming never. I've been involved, as many of you know, in Toastmasters. And in Toastmasters, because we principally, not in every aspect, but primarily help people overcome their fear of public speaking, and by learning to be good communicators, they develop the leadership skills and other tools that they need for day-to-day living. But I often hear people say, I'm just not ready yet. Yes, I do want to give that speech, that first speech, we call it the icebreaker, or I want to give that speech about that particular thing, or I want to serve in that role, but I just need to be ready. So they put it off. I'll do it later when I'm ready. But the problem is, as I have often said to people, if you wait until you're ready, you'll never be ready. Yeah, you get it. You get it. Today, I want to talk to all of us about how waiting will keep us stuck in the place that we're in and why some of the most important conversations in our lives are not about convenience, they're about courage. It takes courage to have that hard conversation and to talk about that very difficult thing in our life that is weighing on us. I know because I walked that road. Over these last several years, as a matter of fact, just this past June 2nd will be the 7th anniversary of Donna's death. But during these 7 years, I've learned something about grief. Now, I had learned things about grief prior to that because I remember when my father died and there was a grief experience associated with it there. But over these last several years, I've learned this. People often assume the greatest pain comes from the loss itself. And honestly, that is true. However, sometimes the deeper pain comes from words that are never spoken, the words that you need to actually speak. And by the way, it's a two-edged sword. It's a two-sided coin. Just as there are words that you need to speak, there are words that you need to hear. People often assume the greatest pain comes from the loss, but there are situations where opportunities are missed, conversations get put off, and if they keep getting put off, they may never happen. Assumptions that there would always be more time begin to arise, but it's funny. Sometimes that time doesn't arrive and you suddenly find yourself surprised. I have also realized something about communication. Communication is something that I love to do. But I want you to listen very carefully to this because some of the hardest lessons that I have learned about communication and about the means of communication have occurred since the death of my wife. And you would think with all these years of communication going on, because recently I also celebrated my 76th birthday. What do I have to show for 76 years? Well, one thing I can show for sure is that I am flawed and I make mistakes. And in this particular area here, especially, I have made significant mistakes, even mistakes in which I simply know better and I did not think it through. For example, I will tell you that sending a text message is useful. I use text a lot. Emails can be very useful, and I do use email, not as much as I used to because text messaging has somewhat supplanted that. Social media is useful for me, not so much. I use social media I use social media so as to try to reflect some kind of positive messaging. I don't use it as a communications tool, and I try very hard not to use it to vent, if I could use that term. But take a moment and think about this. Real connection is not about those kinds of tools. Real connection is about presence. We had a pandemic back in 2020, and it continued to reverberate through our lives into 2021 and 2022. There are still the vestiges and the lingering hangover and even the, pardon the expression, stench of what that pandemic did to us as a society here in the United States and probably around the world. But one of the problems with it was that it eliminated the opportunity for physical connection, presence. And there are people to this day who want to be involved in things, but they don't have the time. And I think there's a deeper message there. They don't have the time to come physically, but they'll show up online. It's just more convenient. And I'm thankful for the fact that we have these tools. I mean, I'm recording this audio and video on my Zoom Pro account. And I'm thankful for the fact that this tool is available. But this tool doesn't completely bridge the gap that immediacy does. And by immediacy, I mean being in direct person to person contact with the people in your life that matters. This brings me to some insights that I want to share with you at this point. Number one, waiting often disguises itself as preparation. I'm going to say that again. Waiting often disguises itself as preparation. I'm simply getting ready. Remember what I told you earlier about people saying, it's not that I don't want to do it, I'm just waiting until I'm ready. The problem is you'll never be ready. We tell ourselves we're waiting for the right moment. Maybe we're waiting for the right words to come to us. Maybe we're waiting for an ideal circumstance, or at least one we think's ideal. This one, waiting for the right emotional situation, the right emotional state, the right emotional context. I don't think you can ever be emotionally ready. I think what you have to do is I think you have to let your emotions be honest and let yourself be honest and courageous with your emotions. But the truth is, we tell ourselves we're waiting for the right moment, but many times we're simply not preparing for that moment at all. We're simply putting it off. We're postponing what we should do. And if we postpone it long enough, it will never happen. So that brings me to insight number two. Relationships are built through conversations. One of the reasons why I like telephone conversations as opposed to text and email is that even though the person may not be able to see me, if they know my face visually, at least they have a picture of me in their mind. But when they hear my voice, our voices are powerful tools for communicating our emotional frame of mind. And relationships are built through having conversations. And of course, ideally, having a conversation on a face-to-face basis is, in my opinion, the best way possible when at all possible. Relationships don't grow because people care about each other. Relationships grow because people communicate with each other. I know you care. And there are people that I know in this life who know that I care about them. But the truth is, knowing that I care and then hearing me say it and being able to look me in the eye and hear me as I say it is a far more powerful and effective tool than simply just saying it. You know, there was a time in our lives when the tool we had to communicate if we couldn't see each other in person or talk to each other on the telephone was writing letters. And letters were beautiful things because people had mastered the ability to articulate through the handwritten message the content of their feelings, their emotions, their love, and their concerns. Understanding, though, is built through a conversation. Understanding will always occur through a conversation. And as a result, when you understand each other, you build trust. Trust being built through a conversation. And it's also important to know for those of us that are broken and are on the journey of grief, healing is often built through a conversation. So that brings me to insight number three. One of the greatest lessons grief has taught me is that people rarely remember perfect words. What they remember is that you showed up, you were present. I've had the opportunity recently to work on an on-call basis for a funeral home. Now, I'm not a funeral director, a mortician, or anything like that, but there is an element to the funeral process, the grieving process for the clients of the funeral home, where there are visitations, there are special chapel services held at the chapel, and there's, of course, the graveside service. And there is a fraternity of people working in the funeral business who serve the pleasure of the funeral directors. And their principal purpose is to make sure that the guests and the fellow The fellow friends and family and others who are coming in regards to and with respect for the deceased need to be cared for and paid attention to just as much. The funeral director handles the needs of the grievers and works through that process with them. And funeral directors are an amazing group of people. It's not just the preparation process, it's seeing them through the entire process with dignity, grace, and compassion. And those of us who serve in these roles assisting the funeral directors are there to make sure that the experience for those who come to, for example, a visitation, like one that I was involved in helping with just last night, or with an actual funeral service taking place there at the chapel, or we travel to a church where the service takes place, as well as the procession to the gravesite and the interment process. These all need individuals who serve in the background, and their purpose is to be present and to help. And so showing up, being a kind face, being a caring face, being an understanding face is the most important thing. Look at it this way. If there's somebody that you know that is going through the grieving process, and in so much as I have walked this road, what those people remember is that I sat down with them. I was immediately present, and I remembered to care enough to be present. And it wasn't about what I said. I didn't have the right words. Words are not what's important. Presence is what's important. That sense that's just mystically, almost cosmically radiates from us. And that is, well, I understand. I'll talk more about that in a moment because comforters are not the experts. However, comforters are essential. I've spent some years now learning grief, particularly intensely learning grief in the last 7 years. But I've also come to believe that the best comforters are not necessarily the people with the most knowledge, but rather the people who can honestly look at a person and say, when it's appropriate, number one, I get it. I get it. I know exactly to a great degree how you feel, although each and every single person's particular situation of grief is unique to them. There is a commonality, and that commonality allows us to align ourselves with each other in this process. That's when you can say words like, yeah, I've been there. I remember what had happened to me, but right now my focus is you. Uh, you don't have to explain anything to me. You're not alone. This is why I'm here. I'm here because I get it. I understand. I know. I'm still walking that road. So, what do you do when you realize that you've been waiting to begin reconnecting and having those conversations? Let's talk about some steps that we can take. Number one, reach out before you feel it's comfortable. I might just say this. I don't think you'll ever be totally comfortable. There's no such thing as being ready. You have to be courageous. There's rarely a perfect conversation that you can come up with. And it's important that you understand that it's not about the conversation being perfect. It's about you having the conversation. Step number two, remember that presence is far more important than convenience. It's not about being convenient. It's about stopping what you're doing and being present in the moment. If possible, meet that person face to face. If possible, do what I like to do. I thoroughly love sitting down and having conversations with friends over coffee. And you can have those conversations either at a coffee shop or you can have them in someone's living room. If it's a walk, find a place where the two of you can walk and just take a stroll together and allow the experience of being in a place where you can walk in the presence of each other to be the motivator, the momentum builder. It's always good to sit together. Sometimes I have friends at church who understand my situation and will come and sit down beside me before service starts just to have a conversation with me. You don't know how much that means. It means the world. And I want to be one of those people who can be counted on to do the same thing. So you see, it isn't just about my grief. It's about me understanding that my grief makes it possible for me to possibly touch the life of someone who also is experiencing grief. But the most important thing is that we have to be good listeners. It's not about what we say, it's about how we attend or attune ourselves to the voice of the person who is in the struggle. And you want to be around people who will give you that opportunity. But as I've said before in previous episodes, people will still sometimes say things out of a sense that they feel they have to, and they mean well, but they don't always say the right thing. And when you can learn to understand that for what it is, then you save yourself the possibility of getting your feelings hurt, because most people who take the trouble to speak to you or to say something, even if it's not the right words, have their heart in the right place. They just haven't figured out quite how to say it the right way. And I was that way too before I went through this experience. And now I understand it a whole lot more. Now, step number 3, develop a curiosity about the pain that people go through. I told you that I enjoy the opportunity with my wife to go and sit down in places where we could watch people go by, and we did people watching. And this was something that we did quite frequently years ago before she passed. Today, as I, for example, get a call to help with a visitation like one last night, it's interesting when you greet somebody at the door and you thank them for coming and you give them information as to where to find the main lobby, where the guest book is, so you can sign in to let the family know that you came to express your condolences, and also where the viewing is taking place, whether it's in a viewing room or a chapel. The whole point is that you are a connection to people who are coming in, many of them not quite sure how they're going to express themselves because the feelings vary. So, what you do is you learn to study people so you can recognize pain, and you don't rush to fix it. You seek to understand it, identify it. You ask questions when possible to be sure that you're being helpful. You listen very carefully if they do respond to not just what they say, but what's the tone of voice? What do you hear in that? But above everything else, you have to show that you care. This is so important because understanding pain and being curious about understanding pain is not morbid. It's actually a heightened sensitivity. And heightened sensitivity gives us greater skills with empathy, sympathy, and with compassion. Now, step number 4, be willing to say, and you've heard me say it before, I get it. But also understand it's not because the experience that that particular individual is going through is identical to yours, but rather because you understand what it means to hurt. Wow. What it means to hurt. Been there, done that. Thank you for understanding. It still touches me to this day. There are people in your life right now who may need exactly what you have to offer. And I'm not just speaking to you, I'm speaking to myself. But understand something, what you have to offer is not a solution, and it's not based upon expertise. Although when you say you get it, you do. You understand hurt. You really are going back to the whole purpose of what this message is. You are a presence. You are somebody who is there. You are somebody who only cares about one thing: letting you know that you matter. So here is what I want to tell you more than anything else. Conversations can change our lives, but a conversation that changes a life never happens if we're waiting for the right time. Truth is, the right time, actually, the right time is now. Don't wait to be comfortable. Being comfortable's got nothing to do with it. Being honest and sincere is what matters. Here's a question I want to leave with you today, and I want you to give it some thought as we prepare in 1 week to come back and continue the visitation of this process. Who have you been meaning to reconnect with if you are currently on your journey of grief? If you are not on a journey of grief, but you relate to this particular situation, who are you waiting to connect with who is going through their own grief experience that you can make a difference by simply just being present? And then ask yourself the following question: what would happen if you stopped waiting and simply reached out, and you did it beginning now, today? This is not merely about grief, people. It's about communication. It's about courage. It's about connection. And it's about being a source of comfort to other people. That is why waiting doesn't get anything done. Waiting only denies you and denies others the opportunity to experience someone who cares. Let compassion be the powerful resource that you bring forward, not because of a skill set, not because you have eloquence, not because you have the right words all the time, but because you have a presence that radiates that compassion. Thank you for joining me today on Resolve to Live Forward. Resolve to Live Forward is many, many things, but right now, this series and episode number 11 in this series that will cover a period of 6 months, and this being episode 11 as we are into the month of June in this journey. Thank you for being with me today. Again, my website is johnmorrowcoaching.com. My Gmail address is johnmorrowcoaching@gmail.com. This podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, including Spotify and the Apple Store. And this podcast episode will be uploaded as a video to my YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that this day finds you well. Whether you're watching it as it has officially been released, or whether you pick up on it at a later time because you follow me in some way, form, shape, or fashion, please, if you know of individuals who are walking that journey of grief and they're trying to find a way to live forward meaningfully, share it with them and let them know that I'm here for you and for them. And I thank you with an open heart for you caring enough to tune in and listen. But until we get together again, by the grace of God, at this time next week, this is John Morrow saying, as I like to say at the conclusion of every single podcast episode, always resolve, make the decision to live forward. This is John Morrow saying thank you so very, very much. Have a beautiful day.